Hey Harmony House, it is chapter book story time. So get cozy with a blanket or a stuffed animal or a pillow, and we're going to dive into chapter 2 of book 2 of the Magic Misfits. So last time we started a new book. We decided that we're going to start reading the second book in the Magic Misfits series. And in the first chapter, we learned a lot about Layla, right? The first chapter went back in time, and we kind of learned Layla's origin story. We learned where she came from. Just like in the last book, we started out learning all about where Carter came from. So in this book, it taught us where Layla came from, and we learned about her time in the orphanage and how, there were some girls there that were not nice to her, but she stayed positive and she stayed strong and just did the best she could to spread her kindness and her love, even if those other girls were not willing to. And we learned about why she became interested in being an escape artist, how those girls that were not kind would lock her in this closet, and she learned how to escape, how to get out of the closet, and she even got out in time to see the end of the magic show, which is where she met a very important person. Who did she meet at the magic show? Do you remember? She met Mr. Dante Vernon, who ended up coming back the next day with his husband and adopting her. So that's how she got her family. That's how she became their daughter, and how she continued on to lead a much happier life, right? So that's really exciting. But now we're on chapter 2. So now we're jumping forward and back in time. Sorry, that was confusing. Now we're jumping forward in time again. And let's see what happens. So chapter 2. One night, years later, in the apartment over Vernon's magic shop, Layla Vernon stretched out atop her big bed, unable to sleep. Thoughts of dark closets kept popping into her head whenever she closed her eyes. A thin patchwork quilt covered Layla's wiry frame, barely protecting her from the brisk air that crept through the open window of her bedroom. The window looked out over Main Street and the green park that extended far out in both directions. The orange glow of streetlights shifted on the walls and ceilings as the shadows of leafy branches danced to a quiet music composed by the crickets and peeping tree frogs that called out to each other from the nestled hills surrounding the town of Mineral Wells. Before bedtime, Layla's two fathers had tucked the blanket around Layla's body and kissed her goodnight, wishing her pleasant dreams. But Layla knew that no wish could protect her from memories of her old life. The dead of night was when they usually came to visit. Sometimes the memories were uninvited guests who stayed long after receiving cues that it was time to go. Sometimes they tried to sneak in, like cloddish cat burglars who had no clue how to finagle a locked door. And sometimes the memories seeped like sulfur smoke through cracks in the walls, threatening to choke and smother Layla, stinging her big brown eyes. When the other memories became too much to handle, Layla would recall her adoption by the Vernons. She held on to the hand of that memory, as if it could lead her to safety. Sometimes it worked, but sometimes the darkness in those locked closets was too difficult to see through. Especially after everything that had happened with B.B. Bozzo and his circus of thieves several weeks before. So, we know because it just said that their battle with B.B. Bozzo just happened. So we're officially caught up in the timeline. But we're also learning something else. Even though, she now lives with the Vernons and she has this group of friends, she still has bad dreams about her life in the orphanage, about when her life wasn't so happy, and that's something that she struggles with. Layla blinked at the ceiling, feeling both blessed and cursed, happy to have this home and this family, but annoyed that the past kept knocking to be let in. This won't do, she thought. She whipped away the quilt, then scurried to her bookshelf where she'd placed her secret tin box. The box rattled noisily. She drew it to her chest to quiet it. Next door was the room of her newfound cousin, Carter. She didn't want the clamor to wake him. Ooh, so Carter has now entered the story. So if you remember at the end of the first book, Carter found out that Mr. Dante Vernon was cousins to his father, his missing father. And so that makes Mr. Dante Vernon Carter's family. And so he was able to move in with the Vernons, and he's now living with them. And he's Layla's cousin. Layla lifted the lid and stared at her key collection, which had grown substantially in the years since she'd moved to Mineral Wells. But her first key, the one tied to the string, the one that had been with her on the night Mother Margaret found her on the orphanage doorstep, sat on the very top. Layla lifted the string and let the key swing back and forth like a mesmerist's pendulum. She thought about Bazo and Carter and the other misfits. She knew that Carter must also suffer from memories of his former life. Because Carter didn't have a great childhood either, right? He had a hard time growing up with Uncle Sly. And Layla had a hard time growing up in the orphanage. But I think what's so awesome about both of their characters is that they didn't let that turn them into a bad person. They're both still really, like, they spread their love and their kindness, and they're both so good and kind. And even when, tough things happen to them and bad things happen to them, that doesn't change who they are and how good they are, right? She wondered if he ever thought of his missing parents, as she sometimes wondered why her own had deserted her on a dark, cold night. Other times she was happy to not think of them at all. She pressed her hand against the cold key as if to make an impression against her skin, one that she might use to forge a copy. Her body warmed the key, and the key warmed her body and calmed her mind. From somewhere beyond her bedroom door, the sound of a commotion stirred, a chair suddenly shifting, a pile of books toppling from a shelf, things crashing to the floor. Next came a sharp and fearful yelp. Uh-oh. So, Layla is lying in her bed. It's nighttime, and she's thinking about her past, and she's thinking about how she's frustrated that she still has these nightmares about these, about her life in the orphanage that was not a good life for her. And she's frustrated about it, but then she's reflecting on Carter and how he also, didn't have it so easy when he was little, and she's reflecting on how grateful she is to have the Vernons and her family and to have all of her friends and now to have Carter as her cousin. And so she's starting to feel better when all of a sudden she hears some clatter in the other room. Remember, the Layla and her dads and Carter, they live above the magic shop, Mr. Vernon's magic shop. So what do you think is happening? She hears a clatter, things are falling to the floor, and then there's a yelp, a whoop. I don't know. We're going to have to find out. That chapter was really short, though, so let's just move on to the next one. Yeah? What do you think? Let's do it. All right, chapter 3. Here we go. Layla raced into the darkness of the hallway, where she was instantly barraged with small, sharp objects flying at her, pecking her like angry birds. With a yelp, she swung her hand at the nearest light switch. The hall flooded with a soft glow. Carter was crouched at his own bedroom door, shooting playing cards from his hands toward Layla. Not angry birds, after all, thank goodness. She swatted them away. "Carter, it's only me!" He stopped immediately. "Oh, geez, I'm sorry." His blonde hair was a mess, his cheeks red and marked with rumpled bed sheets. He must have been woken up by the loud sounds as well. Of course, he had come out of his room prepared with his favorite weapon, a deck of cards. He asked, "Are you okay?" Layla nodded. "You heard that crash and the yelp too?" Before he could answer, there was another crash. The clamor came from behind Mr. Vernon's office door. It was as if the man were barreling into furniture and knocking things over. Layla and Carter pounded on the door. From inside, her dad gave a muffled grunt. Carter tried the knob, but it was locked. Layla whipped out her lucky lockpicks from the pocket of her nightgown. With a few swift movements, Layla worked her magic, and the door swung inward. Dante Vernon was standing in the corner, his curly white hair mussed, his dark eyes as wide as the crystal balls that he sold in the magic shop downstairs. His chest heaved as if he'd just sprinted around the block. "Oh, good," he said with a sudden smile. "At least now I know I'm not dreaming. Please shut the door. We can't let it get out of the room with my book." Despite her confusion, Layla did as she was told. "It?" asked Carter. "What do you mean by it?" Mr. Vernon pointed beneath his desk. Something in the shadows let out a horrifying screech. Both Layla and Carter jumped. "I'd been writing in my notebook when I dozed off. I woke up when something snatched the book out from under my hand," Vernon explained. "The creature snuck in through the window, which I've closed and locked. It's of vital importance that we get my book back. Understood?" Layla and Carter nodded. "Carter, toss me the little rope on the table beside you," Vernon directed. Carter threw the white cord, and Vernon caught it in one hand. "Now, Layla, when I say go, slide the chair away, okay? On the count of 3. Layla nodded, even though she wasn't nearly as ready as she would have liked. But that was what it meant to be a Vernon and a member of the Magic Misfits. You trusted your friends and your family, even when they asked you to help catch a mysterious creature that had snuck into your office in the middle of the night. 1. Layla edged toward the chair. 2. Something growled from under the desk. Layla felt her stomach move up into her throat. 3. Layla yanked back the chair as Vernon dove under the desk. A blur of blondish fur raced over his spine, back toward the wall, and leapt into the shadows behind a large houseplant. "What is that?" Carter yelped, more curious than frightened. Layla leaned forward. The creature's silhouette was about a foot high and resembled a gremlin. Mr. Vernon got up, pushing his hair out of his face. He flicked his wrist and the soft rope became rigid in his grip, a loop forming at the end like a lasso. "Children, back away now. I've got this." "Hold on, Dad." Layla's voice quivered. She picked up the knocked-over lamp and aimed its bulb at the shadows. Instantly, they could see it clearly. The creature looked up at them with fear in its dark eyes. A skinny little thing with a long, slim tail and a black spiked collar around its neck. It shrieked again. It was a monkey. What? They have a monkey running around in their house? What's going on? Friends, I'll bet you're thinking that if you were ever in this situation, you'd plop yourself onto the floor, hold open your arms, and coo, "Give me a hug, you cutie." Let me assure you, nighttime monkey thieves are not nearly as adorable as you'd like them to be. "It's Bozzo's monkey," said Carter, his voice shaking. "I'm sure of it." Vernon raised his finger to his lips, trying to not startle the monkey, who snarled and hitched back as if getting ready to jump at them. That was when Carter snapped his fingers, revealing a shortbread cookie in his other hand. Carter was doing a simple trick called palming. Every good magician has practiced palming at one time or another. Have you? It's a form of misdirection in which a magician hides an object by cupping it in the palm of his or her hand. The magician will then reveal the object by using their other hand to create a distraction. In this case, Carter snapped his fingers to capture the monkey's attention, then showed him the cookie. After being practically homeless for so many years, Carter always seemed to keep a cache of goodies in his pockets. Layla noted to herself. Looked like it came in handy, too. The monkey's snarl faded as he focused instead on the treat in hand. Carter snapped his fingers again, and one cookie became 2. The monkey made a cooing sound as he inched close enough to reach out and snatch the cookies from Carter. He shoved both into his mouth, chewed them up, and swallowed. His eyes glassed over with satisfaction. Layla laughed. The creature wasn't so scary after all. She approached the monkey, sneaking up from the other side as Carter snapped his fingers and revealed another cookie. He let the monkey snatch that one, too. He revealed a 4th cookie. The monkey was so mesmerized by the sweet treats that he didn't notice Layla until she grabbed the notebook and tossed it to her father, who tucked it inside the wide pocket of his robe. The monkey swung his head back and forth, conflicted. He looked from the book to Carter's hand full of cookies. Finally, the monkey caved in to his instincts and settled for the cookies. And who wouldn't? Cookies are delicious. Carter dropped one cookie after another across the floor, leaving a path toward Mr. Vernon, who was waiting with the magical stiffened rope. Her father nodded for Layla to stay where she was, in case she needed to grab the furry little thing. Closer and closer it crept. Vernon was ready to collar the creature when a knock came at the door, and a voice called out, "Dante? Everything okay in there?" With a squeak and the sound of scrabbling claws, the monkey retreated into the shadows on the other side of the room. The office door swung open, and in rushed the other Mr. Vernon, Layla's papa. He stood there with a worried look on his face, dressed in a white tank top and black and white checkered pajama bottoms. When he saw the state of the office, his sleepy eyes grew wide. "Close the door, Papa!" Layla cried. Before he could, a blur of blonde fur raced past his ankles and into the hallway. Papa let out a scream. "After it!" shouted Mr. Vernon. Layla and Carter rushed past her dazed papa and out into the hallway. They followed the racket that echoed from Layla's room. To her horror, she realized that her bedroom door was open, and so was her window. The trio reached her doorway just in time to see the monkey's tail slip past the edge of her windowsill out into the night. Layla sat on the comfortable couch in the living room with Carter as Papa heated milk on the stove in the kitchen. Her papa, who her friends called the other Mr. Vernon, was the chef at the Grand Oak Resort. He was no magician, but he was a wizard at making late-night snacks. "Almost ready," he called out. Her dad, Mr. Dante Vernon, to most others, stood at the window in the parlor. As he spoke on the telephone, he looked outside at the dark street as if waiting for someone to come along looking for their missing monkey. "Do you think Bozo is back?" Carter whispered with a shudder. "I hope not," Layla answered. "I see. Yes, thank you again for taking my call so late at night," Mr. Vernon said, then hung up the phone and walked into the living room. "As far as the officials can tell me, Bozo is still locked up, far away from here with the rest of his evil circus crew." "Except for his gang of frown clowns," Carter shivered. "They got away." "And his monkey too, apparently," Mr. Vernon added. "As we've just seen, that wily creature is not easy to catch." "Why was he trying to steal your notebook, Dad?" asked Layla. Mr. Vernon removed the notebook from his pocket. It appeared to be one of the business ledgers from the magic shop downstairs. Its cardboard cover had a marbleized pattern. Layla knew her dad kept dozens of them behind the shop's counter. Vernon flipped the notebook open. Page after page, names and prices of items were listed in simple columns. "Now that, dear daughter, is a mystery. If I could get inside the heads of animals and decipher their thoughts, I'd be one of the most powerful practitioners of magic in this country." "Maybe he wasn't trying to steal the notebook," said Carter. "If he got left behind by the circus and hasn't eaten in a few days, the monkey probably got lost looking for food. Poor thing is alone and confused and just needs a home." Mr. Vernon smiled. "Anything is possible if you believe it so. In the meantime, we'll need to sleep with the windows closed." "But won't it get stuffy in here?" asked Layla. Mr. Vernon shrugged playfully. "We've all dealt with worse, no?" The other Mr. Vernon came through the doorway holding a tray of treats, steaming mugs, and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. "Milk and honey for my honeys. Drank up, and then everyone back to bed." And there's one more little part here. As Mr. Vernon slid the parlor window shut, Layla thought she heard a cry in the night. Could it have been the mysterious monkey, angry at them for chasing him? Or had it merely been the old window squeaking in its frame? At that moment, Layla wasn't sure what she'd rather believe. Instead, she sipped the creamy and sweet froth from the mug her papa had handed to her. allowing it to calm the fluttering in her belly. And that is the end of chapter 3. So that was interesting. So we know that, Carter's officially living with Layla and her dad's, and they all woke up in the middle of the night to discover a monkey running amok in their house, who they determined was BB Bozzo's monkey. However, we know that BB Bozzo and his carnival crew were all arrested and were taken to prison. And Mr. Vernon even checked. He called the police office and checked and made sure that he was still there. And yeah, he's still in prison, far away, but his monkey is around. And so they're like, well, what is this monkey doing? Did someone send his monkey to steal Dante Vernon's notebook? Or was the monkey just looking for food? What do you think? I don't know. But we will continue reading next time. Chapter 4 next time. And I will see you then. Thanks for reading with me, friends. Bye.